Welcome back. You're watching News Center. The big international story we are tracking this evening. India and the United States are engaged in discussions to reduce average applied tariffs. Sources have told CNBC-TV18 that the discussions are at a nascent stage. We have also been given to understand that this development is seen as part of India's broader effort to lower tariffs through a series of bilateral trade agreements. This will follow similar steps with countries like Australia, the UAE, Switzerland and Norway. This comes a day after President Trump claimed that India has agreed to cut tariffs way down. Speaking to media, Trump went after India's tariffs once again, stating that US can't sell anything in India because it's too restrictive. Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal was also leading an Indian delegation to Washington, D.C. He held talks with US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick and US Trade Representative Jamieson Greer. Joining us right now is former Foreign Secretary and India's ambassador to the United States, Kanwal Sibal. Ambassador Sibal, how do you see the kind of frontal attack that Donald Trump has been making against India, saying that it's impossible to sell anything here? And India, by the way, and I'm quoting him, India, by the way, has agreed to significantly bring down tariffs. How do you read these statements? And also, to put in context what Howard Lutnick actually had to say, he went on to say that we're not looking at a product-by-product deal with India. We want something broad-based. We want something at a macro level. We don't care what you offer to the rest of the world. You need to have a special relationship with the US.
Well, you know, Trump is bullying the rest of the world, including India, on this tariff question. After all, US is a huge market, and it imports, I don't know the exact figure, but a few $1 trillion worth of imports from various countries. Now, if these exports to the United States market is disrupted, which means that the countries that are exporting to the United States will be in a great fix. They'll have to find alternative markets, and it will not be easy. So Trump knows what he's doing. He's openly bullying, but he knows exactly what he's doing. He's totally changing the basis on which international trade has been taken so far. He's also totally rejecting the WTO disciplines. He wants bilateral agreements with countries on trade, where he thinks he has the upper hand. So it's not any, of course, on India, he's very vague on facts and figures, which is a pity, because as you may recall, he said in one of his speeches that the trade deficit with India is $100 billion, whereas in fact it is almost $46 billion. So when he says that the United States can't export anything to India, this again is a back of the hand statement, which sort of means nothing, because after all, their exports to India are about $46 billion. So he can't say that the United States can't export anything to India. With regard to Lutnick's thing, they are making a big mistake, and we have to persuade them why they are making this mistake, because we can have a bilateral agreement with them. And this is allowed under the WTO, and this will then exclude MFN treatment. Because if we go ahead and give not a product-based in bilateral negotiations with the United States, but across the board, then basically it's not the United States that's going to benefit most from it. It will be China. And surely the United States doesn't want that. Therefore, the whole approach is wrong. And it is actually to get his way one way or the other. The other thing is his tendency to make a running commentary when negotiations are taking place behind the scenes. Now, it is a fact that India and our Commerce Minister has gone there with a very positive mind. Instead of being negative about tariff reductions, as we've been in the past, the entire attitude today is different. There's a lot of intensive study has been done by India before this meeting has taken place as to where we can actually go in for tariff reduction, which will satisfy the Americans, and what we can therefore extract in exchange from the Americans. Yes.
Right. Ambassador Sibal, we've seen from the time of the union budget that India had been making concession. We reduced tariffs on fully built cars, above $40,000 US. from about 100% to 70%, even on Harley-Davidson or high-capacity motorcycles over 1600cc and even less than 1600cc. We reduced tariffs in the budget, and also for certain electronic items. So we've been making those gestures for the US. The US knows this, but they definitely want more. I'd like to draw your attention to what some highly placed sources told us on Saturday, that it is very difficult to reveal what's happening in negotiations. We are putting our sensitivities forward, but the current negotiations must be seen in the light of how India reduced the average applied tariffs for countries like Norway, UAE and Australia. Does this give you an indication that yes, India will reduce the average applied tariffs across the board with the US and probably bring it somewhere to the same level?
You see, we have had these FTAs with Australia and with EFTA and with the UAE. So what this high-level source is simply saying is that we have gone down that road with the countries with which we have signed an FTA. And so if we sign a multi-sector trade agreement with the United States, we'll go down that road with the United States too. We have already demonstrated our willingness to do that. And with regard to the concessions made in the budget, that was a kind of a softening posture that even before the Prime Minister visited the United States, it was a message to Trump that we are willing to make concessions to the United States on tariffs. And this was not reciprocal. We didn't ask for anything in return. It was simply a show of goodwill and our intentions. Hoping that would be registered. And it was, because in the joint statement, you'll find a reference to the steps that we took in the budget to open up more trade opportunities for select American goods. But Lutnick is quite wrong when he wants India to make these concessions across the board, unless this is negotiated very, very seriously and deeply between the two sides, where there is some reciprocity, where we have shown our willingness that we can open our economy to more imports from the United States, as against which we will expect that we can export more to the United States. If a target of $500 billion has to be reached, it can't be on the basis that America gains from this and India doesn't. It has to be a two-way process.
It has to be a win.
But
Ambassador Sibal, I'd also like to ask you about what the RSS affiliate Swadeshi Jagran Manch had to say earlier today. In their National Council meeting at Raipur, they passed a resolution saying that any bilateral trade agreement with the US must also protect small farmers in the country and India's small entrepreneurs. They say that the US and Donald Trump know exactly what they're doing, something that you've also said. They don't think that the WTO is working. They want a bilateral trade agreement. And RSS affiliate also feels that, yes, bilateral trade agreements today are more relevant than multilateral agreements. But at the same time, India must also have a nation-first approach, protect ourselves in our own sectors of strength, and protect our farmers and entrepreneurs. What kind of domestic pressures arise in trade agreements or trade negotiations like this? You're no stranger to diplomatic negotiations. What are some of the sticking points or resistance points that we are going to see from our own domestic industry?
The US knows, and the rest of the world knows, that when agriculture has been discussed in the WTO, we have resisted. And we have a consistent position. In the Doha development round, we had very hard postures on agricultural trade. In fact, we asked the West to reduce their trade subsidies on agriculture, on their subsidies to agriculture, etc., etc. So the United States knows that India will not, beyond a certain point, open up its agriculture in a way that will harm our small farmers or our farming community in general. But in specific areas, if you're going to import walnuts or from other
Washington apples
or something like that, we can do that. We can do that. After all, it cannot be a rigid posture that we will not at all yield on anything. Cranberries, well, how many cranberries people eat in India? So there are areas in which we can really allow their agricultural products to come in, but there will not be, I'm convinced, it's nothing to do with RSS and the munch that is pressing for India not making any concessions which may harm our farmers. irrespective of that, India will not do this because this is a very politically sensitive issue. But some would be done in exchange for what we'll be able to sell also some of our agricultural products to the United States. It'll have to be a give and take. But the important thing to register is that India is now in a different mood. It is not in a defensive mood or a negative mood. It knows that it has to have a bilateral multi-sector agreement with the United States that will involve concessions, but these concessions should be balanced so that we can also politically so that we have also gained from this. And this will be the driving...
It has to be a win-win partnership, and it cannot be a clean slate for the United States, as you pointed out, Ambassador Sibal. We've run out of time, unfortunately, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you here on News Center and CNBC TV18. Thank you once again. That's all we have time for on the program. Goodbye.